I agreed to fake a relationship for my job. That alone should tell you I wasn't thinking straight. But what really messed me up wasn't the deal. It was him, Harrison. Because from the very beginning, he wasn't playing by the rules we agreed on. And yeah, I noticed. I just didn't stop it. Started on a random Tuesday that should have been completely normal. Instead, I got called into my boss's office like I was about to be fired. "You're good with people, Dean," he said, leaning back in his chair like this was some kind of compliment sandwich before bad news. "Adaptable. You don't panic under pressure." That should have been a red flag. "Thanks?" I said carefully. He nodded, like he'd already made up his mind about something. "We have a client, important one, and he needs a very specific kind of arrangement." I frowned. "What kind of arrangement?" He hesitated just long enough to make it worse. "Personal, public-facing, temporary." I stared at him. "That doesn't answer anything." He sighed, then finally said it. "He needs a boyfriend." Silence. I actually laughed. Couldn't help it. "You're kidding." "I'm not." "Okay. Then I'm definitely not the guy for that." "You are," he said immediately. "Because you won't make it messy." That didn't feel like a compliment. Before I could argue, the door opened. And that's when Harrison walked in. You ever meet someone and instantly feel like you've already lost some invisible game you didn't even know you were playing? That was him. Tall, composed, expensive without trying too hard. Dark hair, sharp jaw, and eyes that didn't just look at you, they measured you. He stopped when he saw me, just for a second. Then his gaze settled. Slow. Intentional. Like he was deciding something. "This is Dean," my boss said. "The one I mentioned." Harrison didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, head slightly tilted, like he was studying a detail he couldn't quite place. Then, "He'll do." My eyebrows shot up. "Excuse me?" That got the faintest hint of a smile out of him. Not friendly, not warm, just entertained. "You're straightforward," he said. "I prefer that. I haven't even agreed to anything yet." "You will." The confidence in his voice should have annoyed me. It did, but it also threw me off. "Why me?" I asked. "Because you're not trying to impress me," he said simply. "That makes you believable." I didn't know what to say to that. My boss jumped in again, clearly eager to close the deal. "It's simple, Dean. Public appearances, a few events, maybe some online presence. You act like you're in a relationship. That's it. That's it." I repeated. Harrison stepped closer, then not invading my space exactly, but close enough that I noticed. "It benefits both of us," he said quietly. "You help me maintain a certain image. I make sure your career moves forward." There it was. Not a threat, but not a threat either. I exhaled slowly. "And the boundaries?" That seemed to interest him. "Important question," he said. "Yeah, well, I don't usually pretend to date my clients." That time, the smile was a little more real. "Understandable." He ticked things off calmly, like he'd done this before or at least thought about it way too much. "Public, convincing, private, professional. No real feelings," I added. "Of course. No crossing lines." A pause. Just a second. Then, "If you say so." Something about the way he said it made my stomach tighten. Like he didn't fully believe in that rule, or didn't plan to follow it. I ignored that feeling. Big mistake. "Fine," I said. "I'll do it." 2 days later, I was standing in a crowded, expensive venue pretending I belonged there. First event. First test. I kept reminding myself, this is just acting. Smile. Nod. Don't overthink. Easy. I was mid-conversation with some investor whose name I'd already forgotten when I felt it. A hand on my back. Warm. Firm. Too familiar. I froze for half a second before forcing myself to relax. Harrison. Of course. He stepped in beside me smoothly, like he'd always been there. "Sorry," he said to the guy I was talking to. "I'm stealing him for a moment." The guy laughed like that was completely normal. Because to everyone else, it was. That's what made this so convincing. Harrison guided me away, his hand still resting low on my back. Not moving, not light, grounding, possessive. As soon as we were out of earshot, I leaned slightly toward him. Bit much, don't you think? I muttered. You looked uncomfortable, he replied. I was fine. You were stiff. That's because you just grabbed me out of nowhere. His fingers pressed just slightly against my back. Subtle, but very intentional. That's kind of the point, he said quietly. I turned my head just enough to look at him. Up close, he was worse. Sharper, colder, more focused. Physical contact only when necessary, remember? I said. His gaze held mine. Steady, unreadable. Then, almost like he was letting me in on a private joke. This is necessary. My chest tightened. There was something off about the way he said it. Not teasing, not playful, certain, like he'd already decided what necessary meant. And I didn't get a say in it. I should have stepped away. I should have reminded him of the rules. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was. And his hand didn't move. That was the moment I should have realized. This wasn't going to stay fake. Because Harrison wasn't pretending. He was testing me. And worse, a part of me was already curious how far he'd go. I told myself it was nothing, just part of the act. That's what I kept repeating in my head the entire night while Harrison's hand stayed on me longer than it ever needed to. Too natural, too comfortable, like he'd done it 100 times before. Except, something told me he hadn't. After the event, I expected him to just drop it, step back, reset, go back to professional. That's what we agreed on. Instead, the second we stepped outside, he didn't move away. Not immediately. The night air was cooler, quieter, but I could still feel the heat of his hand through my shirt. Good job, he said. Simple, calm. But his hand was still there. I glanced down at it, then back up at him. You can let go now. A beat. Then slowly, too slowly, he pulled his hand away. Right, he said, like it hadn't even crossed his mind. I narrowed my eyes slightly. You forgot. His expression didn't change much. But there was something there. Something faint. Amusement. I didn't think you'd mind. That caught me off guard. I do mind. Do you? The way he said it. Quiet. Direct. Like he wasn't asking. Like he was checking. I exhaled, shaking my head. We had rules. Yes, he said easily. And you're already bending them. Not bending, he corrected. Adjusting. I let out a short laugh. That's not better. He stepped a little closer, then not enough to be obvious, but enough that I noticed. You want this to look real, don't you? He said. Yeah. Then it has to feel real. Something about that landed heavier than it should have. Because he wasn't wrong. That's what made it dangerous. The next few days were strange. We didn't see each other constantly, but when we did, it felt like something had shifted. At first, it was subtle. A hand on my shoulder that lingered a second too long. Standing just a little too close when no one was watching. Texts that were technically about work, but didn't feel like it. Then came the second event. This time, I was more prepared. Or at least I thought I was. You look nervous, Harrison said as we stood near the entrance. I'm not, I replied. You're fidgeting. I always fidget. His lips twitched. Not like this. Before I could respond, he reached up and adjusted my collar. My breath caught. It was such a small thing. Normal, even. But his fingers brushed my neck in the process, just barely, and for some reason my body reacted like it meant something. I stepped back instinctively. We're in public already? I said. His gaze stayed on me. No one's looking. Exactly. Another pause. Then softer. You're thinking too much. I scoffed. Someone has to. But the truth? I was thinking too much. About every little thing. About the way he touched me like it wasn't just for show. About the way he looked at me like he was waiting for something. The moment everything really started to blur, though it was later that night. We had stepped away from the crowd again, this time onto a quieter balcony. The city stretched out below us, lights flickering in the distance. For a few seconds, neither of us said anything. It should have felt like a break. Instead, it felt charged. "You're doing well," he said finally. "You already said that." "I'm saying it again." I glanced at him. "Why?" "Because you don't believe it." I hesitated. He wasn't wrong. This whole thing still felt unreal. Temporary. Like it could fall apart if I thought about it too hard. "I just don't want to mess this up," I admitted. His expression softened slightly. Barely noticeable. "You won't. You don't know that." "I do." There was that certainty again. That quiet, unshakable confidence. Should have annoyed me. Instead, it grounded me in a way I didn't expect. Then, without warning, he stepped closer. Not rushed. Not hesitant. Just deliberate. My heart picked up immediately. "What are you doing?" I asked, voice lower than I meant it to be. "Fixing something," he said. "Fixing what?" He didn't answer right away. His hand came up again, this time to my jaw. Light touch, but it felt heavier than anything before. "This," he said quietly. And before I could react, he leaned in, stopped just short, close enough that I could feel his breath. Close enough that if I moved even slightly, "We need to be convincing," he murmured. My pulse was loud in my ears. "This isn't," I started. "Necessary?" he finished. His thumb brushed lightly against my jaw. "Tell me to stop." That hit harder than anything else. Because suddenly it wasn't just him pushing boundaries. It was me deciding whether to let him. I should have said it. I should have stepped back. I should have reminded myself that this wasn't real. But I didn't. I just stood there, breathing the same air, not moving, not stopping him. And I think that was the moment Harrison realized something important. Not about the deal, not about the act, about me. Because his eyes darkened slightly, like something had just clicked into place. And then, he closed the distance. Not fully, not a real kiss, just a brush. Soft, testing, gone almost as quickly as it happened. But it was enough. Enough to make my chest tighten. Enough to make everything feel different. He pulled back just slightly, watching my reaction. "Still want to keep things strictly professional?" he asked quietly. I swallowed. Because the truth? I didn't know anymore. And that was exactly the problem. I didn't sleep that night. Not because anything really happened, but because something almost did. And somehow, that felt worse. I kept replaying it in my head. The balcony, his hand on my jaw, that pause, that choice he gave me. Tell me to stop. And I didn't. That was the part one couldn't ignore. Not the almost kiss. Not the way my body reacted, but the fact that I let it happen. The next morning, I told myself I'd fix it, set boundaries again, make things clear, reset everything back to what it was supposed to be. Professional, controlled, fake. I even practiced what I'd say on the way to work like an idiot. Last night crossed a line. We agreed on rules. This doesn't work if you keep pushing. Simple, direct, done. Except, the moment I saw him again, all of that went out the window. He was already there when I arrived. Of course he was, leaning casually against the edge of the conference table like he owned the place, which he kind of did in a way. His eyes lifted the second I walked in, locked onto mine, and just like that, my entire train of thought derailed. "Dean." My name sounded different when he said it. Lower, more deliberate. "Morning," I said, trying to sound normal, like nothing had shifted, like I hadn't spent half the night thinking about him. He straightened slightly, watching me, too closely. "You left early," he said. I shrugged, setting my bag down. Didn't feel like staying. A lie. He knew it. I knew it. But neither of us called it out. "Right?" he said quietly. There was a pause. Thick, uncomfortable, or maybe just charged. Cleared my throat. "We should talk." His expression didn't change much. "About last night?" Straight to it. Of course. "Yeah," I said. "About that." I forced myself to meet his gaze. "We agreed on boundaries." "We did. And you crossed one. A beat. Then, did I?" I frowned. "Seriously." His head tilted slightly. "I told you to stop me. That doesn't mean." It does, he cut in calmly. And that calmness? It was more frustrating than if he'd argued. You gave me the choice, he continued. And you didn't take it. My jaw tightened. That doesn't mean you should keep pushing. His eyes didn't leave mine. I only push when I think you'll let me. That landed harder than I expected. Because there it was again. That quiet certainty. Like he already understood something about me that I was still trying to figure out myself. That's not how this works, I said. No? He asked. No. Silence stretched between us. Then softer. Then tell me where the line is, Dean. I hesitated. And that hesitation? He noticed. Of course he did. The problem was, I didn't know anymore. Before it was easy. No real feelings. No unnecessary contact. Keep it fake. But now, after last night, after the way my body reacted just from him being close, the line felt blurry. And he could see that. I could tell by the way his gaze softened just slightly. Not in a comforting way. In a knowing way. That's what I thought, he said quietly. Something in my chest tightened. I just don't want this to get complicated, I admitted. It already is. I let out a frustrated breath. It doesn't have to be. He took a step closer. Not touching me. Not this time. But close enough that I felt it. That depends, he said. On what? On whether you're pretending this doesn't affect you. My pulse picked up. It doesn't. A lie. A bad one. His lips curved slightly. Dean. Just my name. But the way he said it. Like he didn't believe me for a second. Like he knew. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. The rest of the day was tense. Not openly. Not in a way anyone else would notice. But between us, it was there. Every glance. Every moment we stood a little too close. Every time his hand brushed mine and didn't move away immediately. It wasn't accidental anymore. And the worst part? I stopped pretending it was. That night I got a message from him. No context. No build-up. Just, Harrison, dinner, 8 p.m., my place. I stared at my phone for a solid minute. Then typed, me. This work related? 3 dots appeared. Then, Harrison. Depends on how you behave. My chest tightened. I shouldn't have gone. I knew that. Every rational part of me was screaming don't do it. But something else, something louder, was curious. Curious about him. Curious about where this was going. Curious about how far he'd actually push. And maybe how far I'd let him. So yeah, I went. And looking back, that was probably the exact moment things stopped being fake completely. I just didn't realize it yet. I knew I shouldn't have gone the second I stepped out of the car. Not because anything had happened yet, but because of how it felt. Like I wasn't just showing up for dinner. Like I was walking straight into something I wouldn't be able to control. Harrison's place was exactly what you'd expect. Minimal. Clean. Expensive without being loud about it. The kind of place that didn't feel lived in. Just owned. I barely had time to take it in before the door opened. And there he was. Casual this time. No suit. Just a dark shirt. Sleeves slightly rolled up. Somehow worse. Dean. My name again. Same tone. Like he'd been expecting me not just tonight, but in general. Hey! I said, trying to sound normal. He stepped aside to let me in. Close enough that our shoulders brushed. Not accidental. Definitely not. Dinner itself started normal. Or at least as normal as it could be considering everything. We talked about work at first. The deal. The expectations. Upcoming events. Safe topics. Controlled. But it didn't stay like that for long. You've been thinking about it? He said at some point, setting his glass down. I looked up. About what? Last night. Straight to it again. Of course. I exhaled quietly. Yeah. And I hesitated. Because I didn't want to say the truth. But lying to him felt pointless. It crossed a line, I said finally. And you didn't stop it. There it was again. That same point. That same pressure. That doesn't mean I wanted it to happen, I said. His gaze sharpened slightly. Doesn't it? My chest tightened. You're twisting it. No, he said calmly. I'm clarifying it. I let out a short breath, leaning back in my chair. This is exactly what I meant, I said. You don't follow the rules. I follow the ones that matter. That's not how agreements work. Maybe not yours. The tension between us thickened. Not loud, not explosive, just heavy. At some point, we moved to the living room. I don't even remember how. One second we were at the table, the next. We were sitting way closer than we should have been. That's when I started noticing it again. The way he looked at me when I wasn't speaking. Not casual. Not distracted. Focused. Like he was waiting for something. You're tense, he said. I'm not. You are. I scoffed lightly. You always say that. Because it's always true. I shook my head, looking away. Maybe I just don't like not knowing what you're doing. A pause. Then, I'm not hiding it. I turned back to him. Really? Yes. Then what are you doing? Another pause. But this one felt different. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at me, steady, unmoving. Then, I'm seeing how far you'll let this go. My breath caught slightly. There it was. Out in the open. No pretending. No pretending it was just for show. Why? I asked. Because you're not stopping me. That doesn't mean. It means something. He cut in, softer this time. Not forceful. Not aggressive. Just certain. And I want to know what. My heart was beating faster now. I could feel it. In my chest. In my throat. Everywhere. You're making this more complicated than it needs to be, I said. Or simpler, he replied. How is this simpler? Because we stop pretending it's just an act. Silence. That hit harder than anything else he'd said. Because part of me already knew. We weren't pretending anymore. Not really. He shifted slightly closer. Not touching. Not yet. But close enough that it changed the air between us. If this was just business, he said quietly, you would have pulled away by now. I didn't respond. Because he was right. Again. And I hated that. You didn't, he added. I could, I said. Then do it. A challenge. Clear. Direct. My body tensed slightly. Because suddenly, it felt like everything came down to that moment. Step back. Reset. End whatever this was turning into. Or stay. Let it happen. I should have moved. I didn't. His eyes darkened just slightly. Like he'd been waiting for that. Then, slowly, he reached out again. This time, his hand brushing lightly against mine. Not grabbing. Not holding. Just there. Testing. Waiting. I didn't pull away. And that was all the answer he needed. Dean, he said quietly. My name again. But softer this time. Closer. I swallowed. Yeah. You keep saying you don't want this to get complicated. I don't. Then why are you still here? That question. It hit deeper than anything else. Because I didn't have a clean answer. Not one that made sense. Not one that kept things simple. I don't know, I admitted. Honest. Finally. Something in his expression shifted. Not victory. Not satisfaction. Something quieter. More real. Good, he said. I frowned slightly. Good. It means you're not lying anymore. Before I could respond, he moved closer. This time there was no pause. No tell me to stop. No testing. Just a slow, deliberate shift into my space. Close enough that I could feel his breath again. My pulse spiked instantly. Harrison, I started. But it came out quieter than I meant it to. Not a warning. Not really. More like hesitation. And he heard it. Of course he did. His voice dropped. Still want me to stop? I hesitated. Again. And that hesitation? That was the answer. He didn't rush. Didn't push. Just closed the distance slowly. Until there was nothing left between us but that last inch. And this time, I didn't pretend it was just part of the act. I knew exactly what it was. And I still didn't move. The moment his lips touched mine, everything stopped feeling like a decision. And started feeling like something I'd been heading toward the entire time. It wasn't rushed. Not aggressive. Not even hungry the way I expected it to be. It was controlled, measured, like everything else about him. But that didn't make it any less intense. If anything, it made it worse. Because he wasn't guessing. He wasn't unsure. He knew exactly what he was doing. And I didn't stop him. For a second, I just froze. Not pulling away. Not leaning in. Just there. Feeling it. Trying to process how something that was supposed to be fake suddenly felt way too real. Then his hand moved. Not fast. Not forceful. Just resting lightly at my side. Steadying me. Grounding me. And that's what broke whatever resistance I had left. Kissed him back. The shift was immediate. Subtle but unmistakable. Like something unspoken had just been confirmed. His hand tightened slightly. Not enough to trap me. Just enough to hold me there. And for a moment, everything else disappeared. The job. The deal. The rules. All of it. When we finally pulled back, it wasn't dramatic. No sudden movement. No awkward rush. Just a slow separation. Like neither of us wanted to break it too quickly. My heart was racing. Way faster than I wanted it to be. Way faster than made sense. And he was just watching me. Again. That same focused look. But softer now. Less calculated. More real. That wasn't part of the agreement, I said quietly. My voice didn't sound like I expected it to. Not firm. Not controlled. He didn't answer right away. Just studied my expression like he was trying to read something deeper than what I said out loud. No, he said finally. It wasn't. Then why? Because you didn't stop me. There it was again. But this time, it didn't feel like pressure. Felt like truth. I exhaled, running a hand through my hair. That's not a good reason. It's an honest one. I let out a quiet, almost frustrated laugh. You always do that. Do what? Say things like they're simple when they're not. He tilted his head slightly. They are simple. No, they're not, I said, meeting his gaze. This, I gestured vaguely between us, isn't simple. A pause. Then quieter. It doesn't have to be complicated either. That caught me off guard. Because I expected him to push. To lean into it. To keep testing boundaries like he had been. But instead, he just sat there. Close. Calm. Like he was giving me space to think. And somehow that made it harder. You're not even going to pretend that didn't mean anything? I asked. No. Why not? Because it did. Simple. Direct. No hesitation. My chest tightened again. Because part of me wanted him to deny it. To brush it off. To make it easier to step back. But he didn't. He just made it real. This was supposed to be fake, I said. It was. Was? His gaze held mine. Is it? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Not anymore. The silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy. Like something had shifted into place and neither of us knew what to do with it yet. We should slow this down, I said finally. Sounded like the right thing. The smart thing. The safe thing. He nodded once. Okay. That was it. No argument. No pushback. Just agreement. And somehow that made it even harder to breathe. Okay. I repeated. You want to slow it down, he said. We slow it down. I studied his face, trying to figure out if there was something behind that. Some hidden intention. But for once, there wasn't. Or at least I couldn't see it. That's new, I said. What is? You not arguing. A faint smile touched his lips. I don't argue when I don't need to. And you don't need to now? No, he said. A pause. Then, because you're still here. That hit harder than anything else. Because he was right. Again. I could leave. Right then. Walk out. End whatever this was before it got worse. More complicated. More real. But I didn't move. Didn't even try. And I think that's when it finally clicked for me. This wasn't about him breaking the rules anymore. It wasn't about him pushing boundaries. It was about me letting them disappear. Dean, he said quietly. I looked at him. Yeah. We can stop this whenever you want. My chest tightened. Because for the first time, it actually felt like a choice. A real one. No pressure. No manipulation, just truth. But instead of answering, instead of stepping back, I stayed right where I was, looking at him, close enough to feel it all over again. And that's when I realized something I probably should have understood way earlier. This wasn't fake anymore, and I wasn't sure I wanted it to be. After that night, things didn't go back to normal. They couldn't, because now there was something real sitting underneath everything we did, and neither of us could pretend it wasn't there. The next event felt completely different. Same kind of place, same kind of people, same act. But this time it didn't feel like acting. Not for me, and definitely not for him. Harrison found me before I even had time to settle in. "Stay close tonight," he said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. "That's new." "It's a bigger crowd," he replied. "That's not a real reason." His gaze flicked to mine. "It's enough of one." Something about the way he said it made me stop pushing. So I stayed. And yeah, we were convincing. Too convincing. His hand rested at my back again, but now it felt different. Not like a performance. Not like a calculated move. Just natural. And that was the problem. Because I didn't even think about stepping away anymore. At one point, someone asked how long we'd been together. I should have hesitated. Should have thought about the story. But before I could answer, "Long enough," Harrison said smoothly. His fingers pressed lightly against my side. "And not long enough." The guy laughed like it was charming, like it was romantic, like it was real. And for a second, I forgot it wasn't supposed to be. Later, when we stepped away from the crowd again, I didn't pull away from him this time. Didn't create distance. Didn't reset. We just stood there, close, quiet, like it made sense. "You're getting used to this," he said. I glanced at him. "So are you." "I was always used to it." "That's not true." A pause. Then quieter. "No," he admitted. "It's not." That caught me off guard. Because Harrison didn't admit things easily. Not like that. "This isn't what you planned," I said. "No." "Then why keep pushing it?" He looked at me. Really looked this time. Not calculating. Not testing. Just honest. "I'm not pushing anymore," he said. I frowned slightly. "Then what are you doing?" A small pause. Then, "Seeing if you stay." That hit harder than it should have. Because it wasn't about control anymore. It wasn't about him testing limits. It was about something simpler, and somehow more dangerous. "I could leave," I said. "You could. But you don't think I will." His expression didn't change much. "No," he said. "I don't." "Why?" Because yeah, I needed to hear it. I needed to understand what he thought this was. What we were becoming. He stepped just a little closer. Not enough to trap me. Just enough that I felt it. "Because you stopped pretending before I did," he said quietly. My chest tightened. Because that was true. For a second, neither of us moved. The noise from inside faded into the background. Everything narrowed down to just this moment. This space between us. "This still ends," I said. Came out softer than I meant it to. More like a reminder to myself than anything else. "It was always temporary." "Yes," he said. No hesitation. No argument. Just agreement. And somehow, that made it worse. Because now it felt like there was a clock ticking. On something that wasn't supposed to matter this much. "Then maybe we should keep it simple," I added. "Simple?" he repeated. "No more this?" I gestured vaguely between us. The closeness. The tension. The not fake anymore part. He watched me carefully. "Is that what you want?" I hesitated. Again. And yeah, that was answer enough. A faint, almost knowing look crossed his face. "You're the one who said you didn't want it complicated," he said. "I don't. But you're still here." There it was. Again. That same quiet truth. I let out a slow breath. Because I was starting to realize something I hadn't wanted to admit. This wasn't just him anymore. It wasn't just him breaking rules. It wasn't just him pushing. It was both of us now. And the worst part? I didn't know how to stop it. Not without walking away completely. And I wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. So instead, I stayed. Right there. Close enough to feel it. Close enough to keep pretending. Even though we both knew it wasn't pretending anymore. I should have ended it before it got worse. That's the part one keep coming back to. Not the kiss. Not the tension. Not even the way everything stopped feeling fake. But the fact that I saw where this was going. And still didn't stop it. A week later, everything changed. Not because of us. Because of the job. My boss called me in again. Same office. Same tone. But this time there was something different in the air. Something final. The deal's almost closed, he said. I nodded slowly. That's good, right? It is. A pause. Then. That means we won't need the arrangement much longer. There it was. Simple. Clean. Expected. And somehow, it still hit harder than I thought it would. Okay, I said, like it didn't matter. Like I hadn't spent the last week getting used to something that wasn't supposed to be real in the first place. There's just one last event, he added. Big one. After that, everything wraps. I nodded again. Got it. After that, he continued, you and Harrison go back to normal. Normal, right? Except I didn't even know what that meant anymore. I saw Harrison later that day. Same as always. Calm. Controlled. Untouchable. At least on the surface. You heard? He asked. Yeah. A pause. That's it then. Yeah. Neither of us said anything else for a second. Because there wasn't much to say. This was always the deal. Temporary. Transactional. Clear boundaries. Except we'd already broken those. There's one more event, he said. I know. And after that, we're done. I said it before he could. Because I needed to hear how it sounded out loud. Needed to see if it felt as final as it should. It did. And it didn't. He studied my face for a moment. Like he was looking for something. Does that bother you? He asked. I shrugged. It's what we agreed on. That's not what I asked. I exhaled slowly. Because yeah, it did bother me. More than I wanted to admit. It's fine, I said. A lie. Not even a good one. His gaze didn't waver. Dean. Just my name. But this time, it wasn't teasing. Wasn't testing. It was something else. Something heavier. You can say it, he added quietly. Say what? That you don't want it to end like that. My chest tightened. Because he said it so easily. Like it was obvious. Like he'd already accepted it. That's not what this is, I said. Then what is it? I didn't answer. Because I didn't have one. Not a clean one. Not one that didn't complicate everything. He stepped a little closer. Not pushing. Not trapping. Just there. I told you before, he said. We stop whenever you want. That's not the same thing. No, he agreed. It's not. A pause. Then. But it's still your choice. That word again. Choice. I could walk away after the final event. Go back to normal. Pretend none of this meant anything. Or I could admit that it did. And deal with whatever came after that. The final event came faster than I expected. Big venue. Important people. Everything riding on appearances. And yet, we were perfect. Every touch. Every glance. Every moment. It all looked exactly like it was supposed to. Like we'd done this 100 times. Like it was real. But underneath that, there was something else. Something quieter. Heavier. Because we both knew. This was the last time. At one point, someone joked about us being too good together to be new. I laughed it off. Played the part. But Harrison didn't. He just looked at me. For a second too long. Like he was deciding something. Later, when we finally got a moment alone. No crowd. No noise. Just us. The shift was immediate. This is it, I said. He nodded. Yes. No hesitation. No denial. Just truth. I swallowed. After tonight. We go back to normal. Yes. Again. Simple. But neither of us moved. Neither of us stepped back. You're still here, he said quietly. I let out a small breath. So are you. A pause. Then. That's because I'm not pretending anymore, he said. That hit hard. Neither am I admitted. And yeah, that was the first time I said it out loud. Silence settled between us. Not awkward, just real. So what now? I asked. A simple question, but it felt bigger than anything else. He looked at me, not calculating, not testing, just steady. That depends, he said. On what? On whether you want this to end. A small pause, then, or start for real. My heart picked up, because that was it. The actual choice. No contracts, no fake rules, no expectations, just. And for the first time since this whole thing started, I didn't hesitate. Then don't make it end, I said quietly. Something in his expression shifted. Not dramatic, but real. And that's when I knew. This was never really about fake anything. It just took me way too long to admit it. For a second, neither of us moved. Not after I said it. Not after everything we just admitted without really saying the words we'd been avoiding this whole time. Don't make it end. It hung there between us. Real. Irreversible. Harrison didn't react immediately. And that scared me more than anything. Because for the first time since I'd met him, he wasn't in control of the moment. Or maybe he was choosing not to be. You're sure? He asked finally. Not challenging. Not testing. Just asking. And yeah, that was new. I nodded slowly. Yeah. My voice was steadier than I expected. I'm done pretending this doesn't mean something. A pause. Then quieter. Are you? His gaze held mine. Longer than usual. Deeper. Like he was actually thinking about it this time. Not calculating. Not strategizing. Just deciding. I was done before you were, he said. Simple. Honest. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Of course you were. That earned a faint smile. The kind that didn't feel sharp or controlled. Just real. So what now? I asked. Because yeah, we'd crossed every line. Broken every rule. But we hadn't figured out what came after. No more pretending, he said. Okay. No more necessary excuses. I almost laughed at that. Good. And no more acting like this ends when the deal does. That one hit differently. He wasn't leaving space for an easy out. No fallback. No clean exit. You don't do halfway, do you? I said. Not with things that matter. A beat, then. And this matters. There it was. Clear. Direct. No ambiguity. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said. It does. The noise from the event started to creep back in. Voices. Music. The world we'd been performing in for weeks. But it didn't feel the same anymore. Because now, we weren't part of it. Not really. We should probably go back, I said. Probably. Neither of us moved. This is weird, I added. A little. Because now we're actually what? Together. The word felt strange coming out. Too simple for something that had been this complicated. Harrison's expression softened slightly. Yeah, he said. We are. No hesitation. No overthinking. Just certainty. I let out a small breath, shaking my head. Started as a fake relationship for work, and ended as something else. I glanced at him. Something real. For once. He didn't add anything to that. Didn't twist it. Didn't push it further. Just let it be what it was. We walked back inside together. And yeah, we still looked the same. Still convincing. Still perfectly in sync. But now, there was no act behind it. No performance. No rules to follow. Just us. And somewhere between all of that, between the fake smiles, the forced closeness, the boundaries we kept breaking, I realized something kind of ridiculous. I agreed to fake a relationship for my job, and somehow ended up in something real with a guy who never followed the rules in the first place. And honestly, I think that's exactly why it worked.